Hello, I am Jason Lance. I'm the Assistant Director at the Assistant Director of Information and Communications Technology at the Innocence Project, located in New York, and also a developer and consultant on the side under the name UseLab. I'm here today to mostly talk about the fundraising system that we built at the Innocence Project and released as open source, which has been in production for about 11 months now. So a quick background, the Innocence Project is a national nonprofit organization that represents people who are wrongfully convicted, and DNA evidence can prove that they were wrongfully convicted. As numbers geeks, some of these numbers are pretty fascinating. Some of the pictures on the side actually show you a bit of the personal stories, which are just incredible. The thing that motivates me the most is there's been, I think, 305 DNA-based exonerations. We get 4,000 letters a year. So when we talk about fundraising, fundraising could make a huge difference. So the background of the project, we started originally on an architecture called Convio Luminate, which is now under the Blackbaud brand, who also makes Razor's Edge and eTapestry. It's an all-in-one system, and it is integrated, but it didn't really seem to excel at any of the particular parts necessarily. Also, the pricing tiers are based on your list size, so after we passed 50,000 people in our list, there was a substantial price jump for us, which was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back internally. And it's an all-in-one versus best-of-breed system. I'm generally architecturally a fan of best-of-breed concepts. So the new architecture that we went with is best-of-breed swappable with swappable components. We're using Salesforce.com for the CRM. In the nonprofit world, Salesforce will give 10 free user licenses. It's kind of a no-brainer to me. It's one of the best database systems that's out there to run this. For email, we're using MailChimp. For advocacy, we're using CapWiz. And then as we got in and we started looking at the fundraising options for Salesforce, there was a big question mark. So we had what we felt were some fairly basic requirements. We wanted to make sure that we could handle one-time and recurring donations, that we could handle honorary or memorial donations, that we could do peer-to-peer fundraising, which I'll show you a little bit more if you're not familiar with that term, that we could do event ticket sales, obviously that it was integrated with Salesforce, that we had the ability to maintain our brand integrity so that we could completely white label the system, minimize the transaction processing fees, avoid PCI headaches. Generally running a PCI compliant server will cost you about $600 a month, so that adds significantly to the cost if you are running credit card data through your system. And also we wanted to make sure that it had a modern user interface. So we wound up making the decision internally to build our own system, and we decided to build it on top of Plone, make it a dedicated standalone Plone site. There's a few reasons that went into that, but it's an important thing for people who are considering using this to understand. It is not currently built to install in your existing Plone site. The process of building it took about 2 months. We had 32 hours of contract development, which was David Glick, and a small graphics design budget, about 160 hours of my work hours, and easily over 1,000 personal nights, weekends, and such. So after we released it, I sent this out to an email list that I'm on and got this wonderful reply back, which I think is something that I was kind of expecting in the nonprofit world with a huge Drupal presence. So the reasons why we went with Plone. The first is existing experience. I've been working with Plone for about 10 years now, so it was familiar. There is an excellent collective.salesforce.content package that David Glick wrote that allows you to feed content from Salesforce into a Plone site. Plone.app.theming makes it incredibly easy to completely customize the branding of whatever system we want. Security, this is an e-commerce site after all. And performance, that the cache integration allows us to handle pretty high load on the system if we have an action that drives a lot of traffic to the site. And then in the future, the kind of carrot of Deco at some point to be able to lay out fundraising campaigns and allow you to play around with different ideas was pretty appealing. So after launch, we've been in production for about 11 months now. The system has processed about 6,500 donations. We contracted 40 additional hours of work with Jazzcarta to do some upgrades on the peer-to-peer fundraising side. We built in product forms, which also will handle event fundraising. I'll show you the specifics of that a little bit later. And then the biggest change Originally, we deployed with Authorize.net's direct post method, which turned out to be very loosely coupled and kind of problematic. So I switched over to Stripe, which I would highly recommend if you haven't played with it. It's awesome as a developer for doing online credit card processing. I also made the decision initially that I didn't want to write transactions into Plone. And that turned out to be a mistake because I was writing things directly into Salesforce after the donation, which, as we started expanding the system, started taking 10 to 15 seconds after the donation to return the thank you page. So we changed over to building a dexterity type for a donation. After you donate, it writes to that, and then asynchronously queues up jobs to transfer the data over to Salesforce. So why Stripe? There's no monthly fee for Stripe, unlike most merchant accounts. It's 30 cents, 2.9% per transaction. Stripe essentially tokenizes the card in the browser. So they take the card information directly from the browser, ship it off to a secure server, return back a token, which then you can submit through your normal form submission process. So it integrates really well with the way that we're used to thinking. There's an official Python library. It's very easy to have test mode. They have webhooks, which will actually retry if they don't get there the first time. And as part of this, I wound up building a package, collective.stripe, which is just a real light integration layer kind of around Stripe into Plone. And all of the support for Stripe is, or at least there is IRC support available where all of their engineers basically sit in an IRC channel, which I know is kind of appealing to a lot of people here. So as far as the features and functionality, I'm going to kind of be flying through a good amount of this. Just keep in mind this is like 11 months of intensive work crammed into 20 minutes. So there's 6 main areas that everything starts with a fundraising campaign, which is the root of pretty much everything that the system does. So a fundraising campaign is just a pitch. It's a certain thing that you want to be able to track. Here's an example of our general donation page right now. That page expands out to look a little bit more like this. So after you select the dollar amount, the transaction form expands down. Over on the right, a lot of usability studies have shown that one of the main things that donors look for when they come to a donation site is what percentage of the donations are actually spent. I think the last that I heard, it's something donors generally believe that nonprofits spend about 34% on administrative overhead, which is a little off. So it's really good if you spend less than that, which you should be, on administrative overhead. It's really good to put that on the page and let donors know that. So that's what we call them fundraising seals. And then another seal was just placing the SSL certificate right next to the credit card form, which is when people are actually thinking about security when they go to pull out their card. And we also have social proof. Basically, after a donation, we ask donors to provide a donor quote that's a pitch to other donors as to why they should donate. And these are randomly rotated through and reviewed with a workflow. There's also, on a campaign, you can show progress. This is optional on a campaign-by-campaign basis, so a lot of these are incredibly configurable. But a lot of studies have shown that as you start getting close to your goal, the kind of pile-on effect can be really powerful. So after you donate, you're taken to the thank you page. And on the thank you page, you get your receipt. This is an example of a donation that actually purchased a ticket to an event. I'll show you the front end side of that here shortly. And you're also prompted to share the fact that you donated, spread the word. That pops up a little box like this that allows you to easily share it out to Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. And you're also prompted to provide a quote, which I showed earlier on the front end side. There's also the option for honorary memorial donations. It's just a checkbox on the donation form that you say, yes, I want to make it an honorary memorial donation, and then you're taken to this page before the thank you page so that you can fill it out. You get to pick whether it's in honor of or in memory of, put in the name, decide how you want to notify people. In this case, we're doing an email notification, but you can also do a notification by mail where our fundraising department will actually send a letter to notify the person. And you decide who you want to notify, the info, you can put an optional message, and then it gives you a preview down at the bottom of kind of what the email that's going to go out is going to look like. So, configuring campaigns. And I will warn you, this part, almost all the effort in this has been on the donor-facing front end. So this is going to jump around a little bit. It's a long form. Starts out, you have a title, a description, basic metadata for your campaign. You set a goal for the campaign. The goal, as you can see, is not required, so if you want to have an open-ended campaign, you can do that. You have your fundraising pitch, which is just the TinyMC editor. You can assign an image. You can override that image with a header image, and you'll see that in the next, the peer-to-peer campaign. And you can hide the title and description. This is if you have basically your title and description already in the image and you don't want to show the display of it. It was a request from our fundraising department. In addition, on a fundraising campaign, the way that peer-to-peer works is that you essentially turn on a given campaign and say, I want to do peer-to-peer fundraising, and allow people to create a page, set a goal, promote it to their friends, and collect donations and track the donations. So on the fundraising campaign, you can provide the default content for the personal appeal when somebody comes out and creates a peer-to-peer page, which is this. You can provide default content for their thank you message, and they can customize all of this, but it's really good to, especially if you present somebody that wants to fundraise you with just a blank box about, what is your pitch, they kind of have a tendency to leave the form. So also, like I said, on any fundraising campaign, I think this is in a very, the traditional rugby scrum type fashion. You have a campaign, and then you can have a whole bunch of people pile on and help you towards your goal, but all of their donations kind of roll up into the parent campaign. If you don't want to allow personal fundraising on a certain campaign, you just uncheck this box. You can also make a campaign that's personal fundraising only, which I'll show you here in a second, kind of what that looks like. You can set a start date and an end date, and there is a portlet over on the right side that will actually show a countdown and the number of days left in the fundraising campaign if you want to. So you can configure the donation form tabs. Right now, these are just actually a view that you just put in the view names. If you put in multiples here, you'll have a tab donation form so that you can have monthly on one tab or recurring on another tab, or I'm sorry, one time on one tab and recurring on another tab. And this also makes it really easy if Stripe doesn't work for you. Basically, you just need to be able to build, it's a fairly light layer to build one of these forms that processes the card, presents the information, so you can integrate other payment processors and just plug them in right here. One of the things that I love about Stripe, and one of the, this is sort of backed by collective.stripe, the package that I built. And it allows a piece of content to declare whether it should be in test mode or in live mode. So you can go to an individual campaign, flip it to test mode. The really nice thing about test mode is that you can use the 4222222 whatever test Visa credit card, which for the first 10 months that we, or maybe 9 months that we had the system, and we were using Authorize.net, I had a really hard time getting my head wrapped around how the test mode works with Authorize.net, especially with the direct post method, which is kind of an obscure path for them. So all the testing was done on our personal credit cards, and then we'd go in and refund them. So it was very nice to me when we actually got to the point that we could use test cards. You can also, Stripe handles recurring donations, or recurring transactions in general, so you can build a plan in Stripe or a product, and then subscribe people to that plan. So this drop down here actually calls out to the Stripe API and lists off what plans you have available. And if you select one, then it'll show you a monthly option. I'll show you that in a sec. We also, originally, I was just using SendGrid and using Plone to render the HTML for the emails, and realized that we needed more flexibility than that, especially on some campaigns. We really wanted to be able to customize the email templates that go out. So I wound up integrating both Mandrill and MailChimp. I created as part of that a spin-off product, collective.chimpdrill, and it essentially provides, it allows you to write your templates in MailChimp, and then it does a couple of background things like inlining CSS when it transfers it over to Mandrill. Mandrill is MailChimp's transactional email service. So it allows you to send receipts, things that something just happened and you need to send a message out right now. It's got a really nice Python API. It's very easy to work with. So the email templates that are available on every fundraising campaign, the thank you email, which is the receipt, an honorary email template, or a memorial email template. These are the notification emails if somebody chooses to do email notification. Personal page created template. This is when someone comes out and creates a personal page or a peer-to-peer page, the email that they'll be sent, so you can kind of provide coaching and such in that email. A personal page donation email, which is a notification to a personal fundraiser that someone just donated to their campaign. Usually it's a friend or a family member or something, so they like to know. We also added in where you can have both your donors and your personal fundraisers added to a custom list in MailChimp. And it passes some extra data, like for the fundraisers, it passes their current campaign stats so that you could do autoresponders and say, hey, anybody who is 50% of their goal, send them this message. Anybody who's 20% of their goal, send them this message. So the fundraising seals that I was showing earlier, these are just a dexterity content type. Actually, all these are dexterity content types. It's pretty easy to configure. You give a title, you give a blurb, you give an image, and then you have the more info content, which is when you click on more info, it will expand out right there. One of the general rules in fundraising is you never want to take the donor off of the page once they've landed there. It's very much similar to marketing landing pages concepts. So we wanted to make sure that that just kind of expanded out on the page rather than takes you somewhere else to tell you more. The MailChimp email templates are also a dexterity content type, and this is actually part of the collective.chimpdrill package. The MailChimp template here calls out to the MailChimp API, gets a list of all your templates, so you can select the template that you want here. You select a data schema, which is basically the data that you want to pass to the template. I'll show you more about that in a second. And then you basically just configure the sender information. And you can actually use MailChimp merge variables in here if you wanted to say, Jason just donated to your campaign, which we do for the personal campaign donation notification. So the event types and schemas, this is for the MailChimp templates. All of these variables here get passed to the template for any campaign-based email. In addition, the donation thank you gets passed an amount, the first name, the last name, and HTML blocks of the receipt and the campaign thank you message. The honorary donation gets information about from the honorary form that it can merge in, and the message that the person typed as an HTML block. Memorial donation is the same data set. Personal page created is actually just the standard campaign info, but I provided some links here on this hidden wiki page in GitHub right now. And the personal page donation gets passed the amount, the donor's first name, the donor's last name, and the donor's email. So this is if you want to notify someone, hey, so, you know, your mother just donated to your campaign, and I guess you probably would need your mother's email, hopefully. But. And in addition to that, all of that we were just looking at is the specific configuration on a fundraising campaign. But one of the things that I wanted to do is make it very easy. A lot of times you're launching fundraising campaigns that are kind of the standard configuration, just with a little bit of different pitch content. So we wanted to make sure that we have a good global configuration that provides good defaults. So you can come in and configure the organization name. You can configure the default thank you message, the default personal appeal, the default personal thank you message. Unfortunately, this is it's a control panel in the site settings, so I don't think that I can use the WYSIWYG, or at least I couldn't figure out how to. So this is just HTML. There's also configurable ask levels. So these are, you can actually just pass question mark level equals, and if you put 5, then you're calling out the line with a key of 5 all the way on the left, and these are the different ask levels that you'll show in the form for what you're trying to ask someone. So we've actually been doing this recently where we're calculating what ask level we want and personalizing the emails that go out with custom links to send someone to the page with a different ask level based on their prior donation history. You can set the default one-time ask level if you don't pass the question mark level, and the default recurring ask. In addition, I showed earlier the campaign progress, which is kind of determined by whether you have a goal set on the campaign, and then these configuration options here allow you to not embarrass yourself and show that we're trying to raise $30,000 and we've gotten $100 thus far. So you can set the percentage here. And the second one, actually, the labeling is wrong. That's actually for personal campaigns. And for personal campaigns, it's set to 0 because generally somebody sets up a page and they want to raise $1,000. Even if it's at 0, it's not as big of a deal. But it's all configurable. And lots of things are configurable here. So the peer-to-peer fundraising side is an example. Here's an example of a parent campaign. We did the the TD 5 Bro bike tour of New York. And we had 20 riders, each one who committed to raise $1,000. So this is actually a fundraising campaign, just like the other campaign that we were looking at before, but there's no form on it because it's checked to be just for personal fundraising. So we're not trying to raise money for the campaign. We only want to funnel money through the fundraisers. And you can see the progress over on the right, the number of people that have started fundraising, and the section on the left here is just the campaign pitch content. So if I wanted to come in and create a page, we tried to make this process pretty simple. You provide a title, a description, provide a title, a description. We do require an image because we want these to be able to be shared out on social media, and having an image that's the default image with the shares actually makes it a lot more effective. And they come out and set a goal. The personal appeal here is actually it comes from the fundraising campaign that I was showing earlier. So this is pre-merged into the form when somebody pulls up the form to create it. So they can come in and customize it, or if they just keep the defaults, then hopefully you've designed those well. The thank you message is the same way. It's populated with a default, but they can edit it however they want. And once you have a page, you'll show up on the leaderboard. And the leaderboard basically just shows all the different campaigns that are going on, kind of their status towards their goal. Jump down to one in particular. Barb here is one of my coworkers who rode in the bike tour for us. And you can see we had about 14 fundraisers kind of all sort of actively working towards this goal. An example personal page. This is Barb's page that I just showed you in the leaderboard. And a couple of things on here. So she has her own personalized picture, which is part of the reason that we really want the picture to help personalize it. It says up at the top that it's Barb's fundraising campaign. And we changed around the order of things a little bit in here so that you can have a personal message before the donation form shows. And then on the donation form itself, the select gift type, one-time or monthly recurring, this is unique to the Stripe form. But this is if you've selected a recurring plan, when you configure the campaign, you'll see this option to do it as a monthly recurring gift. So when you are a personal fundraiser and you log into your page, you get this extra personal fundraising toolbar. It starts with just the view of your page, pretty standard. Allows you to edit your page. This is essentially the same form that you used to create it. And allows you to promote your page. This part is pretty cool. It's we integrated Janrain with the system, which is a social integration platform that does social login and kind of more advanced social sharing messages. You can, we first tell them that you can just copy and paste this link into any email and promote it to your friends that way. Or the fundraising administrator who sets up the campaign can add share messages inside of the campaign. And it will randomly select 3 of those share messages to show on this page to give somebody options for what they can share out on Facebook. So my highlight's in the wrong place on that. This is what that looks like. It's very similar to the one on the thank you page, but you can see it actually gets its own custom image, its own custom message. This is really different than the share.php, which will actually go out and read metadata off of your page, and you can only have one representation of the page that way. This allows you to have multiple different messages pointing at the same page with different images and different titles. The drawback is that they have to accept your app and grant it permission. But it is an app that is in your name. So as an example, this is the other share message, so you can see it has a different image completely in order to promote the campaign. You can also go in and look at your donors. You get this nice list of who's donated, the total number of donations, the number of people that you have left to thank. And if you just check the box over on the left, it makes an AJAX call and registers that you've already thanked that person. So that it's just a simple kind of to-do list to help people make sure that they thank their donors. We also send them a thank you email with a receipt, so we make sure that they get that, but it's usually good for personal fundraising to get some personal thank you. And the list of donors can get rather long, hopefully. We also fairly recently added in the ability to handle offline donations towards a personal fundraising campaign. So this is if somebody's doing personal fundraising, they have a house party, they collect a bunch of checks, they can come in and actually register all of those donations. They show up in Salesforce as pledges, so they're not actually considered, from an accounting standpoint as in there yet, and then you can flip them over to posted whenever the check actually comes in. So that just kind of lets the fundraiser know that they need to follow up and get those checks. So in addition to the peer-to-peer, I guess kind of the most recent upgrade that we did was adding, it started as donation products, and then it evolved into this product form kind of concept. And generally, what is a product in this context is an event ticket level, an event sponsorship, an additional donation, T-shirts, stickers, whatever you have that you want to sell. And another use, which we haven't used yet, but I like a lot, is to have targeted donations. So if you have multiple funds and you want somebody to say, I want $50 to this fund and $100 to this fund, then you can just build them as separate product line items in the form. So this is an example of an event campaign from our annual fundraising gala. Sorry, I don't like the term gala. And you can see here the ticket levels. And this is a product form. They're grouped into field sets with products inside of them. So the purchase tickets tables is a field set. And each one of these items inside of here is a product. Now, these products, when they're created, actually become products in Salesforce. So they're actual kind of completely integrated through. And you just fill in the quantity over on the left. Here's another field set for placing an ad in the journal for the fundraiser. A prompt for an additional donation if somebody wants to make an additional donation in addition to their tickets. And basically, once you fill out any of those, the total gets calculated and filled in automatically. If it is more than $5, which is our minimum, the form expands out to collect the payment info, just like the other one. And so the product form, when you're logged in, has inline links that are perhaps not placed in the best of places, but that allow you to quickly jump, and it just pops up the edit and an overlay for that product. So a donation product has a pretty basic configuration. You have a title, a description. You can check whether it's donation only. This is if you want to have an extra donation. There's just some different verbiage in the way that you present it. So if you check that, then it will be that way. You can hide an item. So if you run out of inventory, for instance, it's easy to hide it. You set the price of the item, and then the date, location, and notes are things that will be merged into the receipt if you want to kind of provide extra info about the event and kind of where it's held at. The product field set is just a container that, or a folder that holds donation products. So here is an example. The configuration is really light. The big thing is that you can collapse a particular field set, and you can optionally collapse it on the main fundraising campaign or on personal fundraising campaigns. The way that this was useful to us is for this event, we actually had a couple of organizations that ran an internal fundraising drive. And for them, they weren't really going to be selling tickets, they were selling donations. So we could collapse all the ticket options and allow people to expand them if they want to. And then after the campaign, or after the event was over, we checked both of those boxes so that both of those sections are collapsed. And then you can click in order to see more. But we try to move it around and rearrange it. And these are all just Plone content, so go to folder contents and drag and rearrange them. So the social integration side, you saw some of it with the share messages. We also, one of the reasons you don't want to install this in your existing Plone site is it hijacks the login process. This collective.pluggable login package that David helped figure out how to get together and make this happen. So our login process is kind of unique because most of the time when somebody comes out, they're not a returning existing user. A lot of times these are new users. You don't have to log in order to make a donation. The thing that's tricky is if you do make a donation, there's a user created for you in the background because the users in this site are actual content using Membrane. And so we create a background user, but that person has no idea that they have a user account or how to log into it. So we had to handle or kind of change around the login process to make sure that it was very easy and more registration focused than login focused. And the JanRain sign-in widget over on the left side, if you're returning to it, will actually say, hey, Jason, do you want to log back in? The share messages that I was showing earlier, this is the way that you edit them. You basically just go and add item, share message inside of a fundraising campaign. And you can set the title, the description, the user comment, which is kind of the section that they can edit. So you can kind of pre-fill the section that they can edit with something. And those wind up looking like this as we were looking at earlier. So on the Salesforce integration side, there's a lot. A fundraising campaign becomes a campaign in Salesforce, which is just to track a marketing effort. A personal fundraising page becomes a campaign, but that campaign is linked to its parent campaign in Salesforce. So in Salesforce, you can have a hierarchy that's up to 3 deep in your campaigns, and they have roll-ups so that it'll actually roll up all the donations from sub-campaigns into the parent. A person in the system, which is a membrane object, becomes a contact. We use email as the upsert key. A recurring donation actually uses the Nonprofit Starter Pack's recurring donation object to track recurring donations. A donation becomes an opportunity, which also has an opportunity contact role, which links it to a contact. If there were products purchased, it also gets the products as opportunity products against it. And it's also linked to the source campaign. So you can actually pass on any campaign. When you say you do an email campaign, you want to send people out to your site, you can do !source_campaign equals and then the ID of the Salesforce campaign, and it'll give credit back to that campaign. So that you can track not only which fundraising campaign it came from, but how that person got to the fundraising campaign with more explicit ways. Donation product becomes the product to object in Salesforce, which oddly named to me. Share messages, when you create them, actually are a campaign in Salesforce as well, and they're basically a tracking campaign. So whenever somebody shares that link, it's customized specifically for it's customized specifically to be able to track that it came from that particular share message. And donor quotes is actually the only custom object that we have in the system, and that's just if somebody fills out a donor quote, it's linked to their contact record, it's linked to the campaign that they submitted it under, and it's linked to their donation object. So you can see all of those in Salesforce. So generally what that looks like in Salesforce, you have the expected revenue, which is the goal on the fundraising campaign. So when you create a fundraising campaign, it's actually building this campaign in the background for you. You can see how much the total value over on the left here is direct donations to the campaign, excluding any child campaign donations. And over on the right, you can see the roll-up of all of the child campaigns rolling up into this one. The reason there's a difference in those two numbers is because of the offline gifts, that one field here tracks only one opportunities, the other one tracks the potential opportunities that you have. And you can get a count of the total number of donations. You can go down and see the campaign hierarchy, and this will, for personal fundraising, is really cool because you can see kind of how each person's doing. You can expand out the list and see all of them pretty easily. You see the individual donations here. I left Laura because she is on our fundraising staff, so her name can be there, I guess. And also, the Opportunities Parent campaign is donations that are to a personal campaign are not directly related in Salesforce's data to the parent fundraising campaign, so we added an extra field to that we populate with a background ETL job that allows us to track kind of all the donations that came into this campaign, whether it was to a child or directly to the main campaign. And then on a personal campaign, so this is Barb's personal page, or the campaign for her personal page that we were looking at before. You get the campaign name that she typed in. There's an option in the control panel to configure custom record types. So for different types of campaigns, you can tell the system to create the campaign and make it of this record type in Salesforce, which is handy in kind of setting views and permissions and such. You also get the link to the parent campaign, a link to the contact that created this particular personal campaign, their results thus far. And then when you come into an individual donation, this is a donation in Salesforce. These are opportunity objects that the Nonprofit Starter Pack renames as a donation. And here you can see the primary campaign source is the fundraising campaign that they donated to. In this case, it was our annual gala. The source campaign, you can see here, this person did not come here from a tracking campaign, but this would be populated if you had actually passed that in the URL you sent to them. And the honorary memorial information, if they filled out that form, gets populated in here, so you have access to that data in Salesforce. And the contact role is the way, one glitch in the Salesforce model for nonprofits is that opportunities are to an organization or an account as opposed to directly to a contact. And so you have to have these opportunity contact roles as the way of linking an opportunity. And then if they made purchases, you actually get to see the products that they purchased and the quantity that they purchased here. So a quick kind of comparison. I think at this point the system has pretty much feature parity with a lot of the kind of hosted commercial options that are out there for nonprofits with fundraising. But as I kind of got in and started looking at it and crunching the numbers on it a bit, came up with this graph. And you can see here the gap over on the right side. And it's essentially, the reason for this is because almost all of the hosted fundraising services charge you, in addition to the credit card fees, an additional percentage on top. Problem with that is that when you're dealing with a credit card processing company, if they process $10,000 versus $10, it costs them more money, so they should be charging more. When you are just running a website, that a transaction is a transaction, whether it's $1 million or whether it's $10, the only difference is the profit that the company receives. And as you start becoming more successful in your online fundraising, that gap in how much you're paying in fees starts to get pretty big. Here's an example. The gap here is, well, actually, I've got the actual numbers here. So this is, with our system, kind of roughly what I estimate the current cost to be. Stay Classy, which I think is probably one of the best options out there for a hosted fundraising system, is still, $20,000 more now. The most expensive system would be about $82,000, so that's a gap of about $50K every year, just in the credit card processing fees mainly. If you were to increase your fundraising tenfold, the numbers start expanding. It's still a pretty linear increase, but now you're looking at potentially $500,000 difference in what you're paying annually in credit card processing fees. And that, essentially, a lot of these systems are appealing in that you can deploy on them without any effort. Like, there's no monthly fee, you just go set stuff up, and that's great. But when you start being really successful in fundraising, eventually the costs that you're paying in transaction fees will come back to bite you. So that's the features. And now the future. Have lots of ideas for things that I want to do with it. You saw how much I had to jump around on the forums. I really want to make it easier for a fundraiser or a fundraising administrator to go in, which is basically just reordering the form fields, grouping them together in the right way. It's easy stuff, but I just haven't had the time to do it yet. I also want to build a toolbar for a fundraising administrator that's like a personal fundraiser's toolbar that would show them things like the donations in the campaign, donor quotes that are pending, review, share messages that are in the campaign, and how successful those messages have been. I want to integrate with Stripe's webhooks. So right now we're still using Recurly for our recurring donation processing, but Recurly basically takes the credit card fee plus 1.9% on everything that you do. So if we grow our recurring program quite a bit, we'll be paying that extra 1.9%. Stripe handles recurring and doesn't charge that, so it makes sense to move that over into Stripe. And Stripe spits out webhooks for a number of actions that happen. So we want to make sure that, for instance, if a donation is refunded in Stripe, that a call gets handled back in Plone that then writes it back to Salesforce and withdraws the donation in Salesforce. Right now, that's a manual process. Also, recurring receipts. So Stripe actually does not provide any receipts. It's kind of a philosophical standpoint on their part. They want to focus on credit card processing only and not emails, and have an open API so that lots of people can do emails. So we need a way where whenever somebody's card gets charged on a monthly basis, that it will automatically send them a receipt. And also dunning, which is a term that I didn't really know until I got into this, but it's an accounting term for essentially, like if someone's payment failed, if their credit card has become updated, you can send them emails and kind of prompt them, send them to a form somewhere to go update their credit card information. If you have a lot of recurring donors, that saves a huge amount of staff time or volunteer time. The next thing I want to do, I gave a lightning talk yesterday on Catapult, which is a different backend for the way that I'm handling asynchronous transfers into Salesforce. Right now I'm using plone.app.async, which worked well in a pinch and actually burned me earlier this week. I had a problem that stumped me and took about 6 hours to try to go through and figure out. So that just reinforced to me that I wanted to do that. It also will switch to simple Salesforce from Beatbox. Beatbox is the kind of current Python library that a lot of the Plone integration products use. It talks to the Salesforce SOAP API, and it hasn't been updated since 2011. Simple Salesforce is a new library created by the New Organizing Institute a couple of months ago. It's really simple and light, and it calls the REST API, so it doesn't have all the weight of SOAP. And the other thing about Catapult, right now we have an issue where if somebody has duplicate emails, it will cause an error because the way it's doing the queries, it's expecting only one result back. So Salesforce will return an error if you try to do something and there's multiple on the other end. And I've built in some logic in Catapult to allow you to go out and just run a query to select and then pick whichever one is the first result that you sort how you want to. So this would solve that problem, and it's already written. I really want to move in the direction of what I'm calling test-driven fundraising. This is essentially A/B testing, that you can come into a campaign, you can build multiple different variations for how you want to lay out the campaign. Ideally, this would be something with deco and tiles, and you can like have the donation form over here and pictures over here, and try out these different layouts, auto-select the best variation after a certain amount of time, auto-select the share messages that are the most successful in your campaign so you can kind of see which ones are raising the most money and make sure you're presenting those. And also extend test-driven fundraising to peer-to-peer campaigns so that somebody who sets up a personal page can see statistics on which of their messages or try out different messages with their friends and family and see which ones are successful. Kind of make it a little bit more like a game for them, I guess. Tiles and deco I'd love to integrate. Basically, deco as a layout for the campaigns, tile for all the campaign portlets, which I currently have, and that would just allow you to place them wherever you want to, and making the donation forms themselves renderable as a tile, because then it allows you to put a donation form anywhere. Embeddable widgets would actually be a little bit easier if things were tiles, and it'd be nice to be able to embed the campaign in Facebook, allow somebody to embed their peer-to-peer campaign on their blog so that they can fundraise there and show the status of their efforts. It makes running the system as a standalone site a lot more feasible if you can just kind of plug widgets into other sites where you need. Be nice to be able to support custom form fields like t-shirt size or dietary restrictions, and that could either be on the donation form or potentially right after the donation form. I tend to like the idea of it being after because I think the most important thing is to capture the transaction and then get the extra information next. Have a better process for coaching someone through personal fundraising. It's really daunting to do fundraising, and anything that you can do, especially to allow fundraising administrators to kind of coach somebody through the process and tell them, okay, you did this, now you should really do this, and here's why, I think is very helpful. And exposing some level of analytics to fundraisers also will kind of show them like, okay, you're getting this much traffic, and here's how many people are actually donating versus the traffic that you're getting so that they can perhaps tune. I originally had this idea of using FormStack to do all the donation forms rather than writing the donation form in Plone because there's a lot of neat form features. Ran into some concerns about the security of their integration with Authorize.net, but now that I'm using Stripe, I might want to go back and revisit that. It'd be kind of nice to not have to build the forms at all and have things like abandonment rates per form field that you could track. Building a donor portal where donors can come in, see their giving history over time, they can update their recurring payments, and they can promote a campaign and then track the results of it. So you could kind of give them a tracking URL that they could use to send around to people, and then they get credit for donations that come in. Sort of a light personal fundraising. Extending the MailChimp integration. MailChimp has an e-commerce 360, which is designed to track e-commerce transactions that come from your emails. It'd be really awesome to have donations show up in that so that you could segment based on that a little bit easier. And also creating an integrated campaign. I'm not 100% sure how this would happen yet, but essentially making it easier for a fundraiser to not have to make sure that they pass !source_campaign equals some campaign ID, and make sure that that's in all the URLs that link out, somehow generate those automatically and kind of push them to MailChimp. And extending the Google Analytics integration to use the Google Analytics e-commerce tracking, which I'm not using now, track more events like when the forum was expanded out or if somebody expands out the fundraising seal. And the holy grail to me is if I can get an ID of someone from the new Universal Analytics and follow that ID all the way through to the CRM so that you can relate their analytics traffic, page traffic on the site, back to the donation that came in. I wanted that for like 10 years now, but I think it might actually be possible if it's not banned by their terms of service. Also an integration with employer matching services. There's a couple of services out there that collect data on what employers do matching. And make it easy for after someone donates to then look up and double the impact or triple the impact. Some of them also will give you the form so that you can actually fetch like the PDF and email it to the person and say, here's your company's form to do employer matching. And the kind of bigger part of the future is as I've been building the system out, I'm starting to realize that it really doesn't rely on Salesforce, shockingly. Like, I originally thought that the Plone layer was going to be incredibly light, and it has grown to have a lot of functionality. And now, actually, Salesforce isn't involved in the donation process at all. It's all asynchronous writes afterwards. So I'd like to rebrand the product as collective fundraising, both kind of in the Plone collective sense, but also in the sense that it's multiple nonprofits getting together, coordinating on best practices. I want that rewrite to be test-driven, which is one mistake that I did kind of in a rush. It would have been very nice over the last few months to have unit tests for this stuff. Make it play nice with standard Plone, so don't hijack the login, don't hijack the member. Use the standard Plone forms, which is now possible with Stripe. And use the component architecture to make it easy to expand out. So if you want to integrate Civa CRM or you want to integrate something other than MailChimp, that you just can override those packages. So that's pretty much it. Wow, cool. Here's my email address if you have any questions, or I'll be around here and during the sprints. The link to collective.salesforce.fundraising out on GitHub, and also the link, I have collective.stripe and collective.chimpdrill are both in the collective repository on GitHub, and then Catapult, the current prototype of it, is in my repository out on GitHub right now. Also, kind of recent development today, I think that I've, in discussions with some people, what I really want to do at the sprints, because I'm going to be here for 3 days, is build an instance of this site for the foundation. Because I think being able to do, I've been in this community for about 10 years and have been looking for a way to contribute back, so I think that that would be fun. And you know, thinking about the model of it, Sprint is a fundraising campaign. Say 6 Feet Up wants to have their own personal page off of that fundraising campaign that they promote to their clients so they can track the efforts that come into it. I think it really opens up a lot of possibility for the foundation to do better fundraising. And
Awesome.
yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Any questions?
I just want to say that this is badass. This is really, really
Cool.
and I hope that you're planning on taking a talk for Brazil. Is that who you're picking?
I don't think I'm going to be able to make it to Brazil.
Oh.
I self-finance my trip here, so I don't think I could self-finance to Brazil, but you know, we'll see.
Well, talk to me.
Okay.
Maybe by then we'll have a personal conversation.
Yeah, maybe we can set up a page to send me to Brazil. That's cool. I'm all for that. Anyone else? Yeah.
I came a little bit late. Is your organization offering this only for business project, or is it?
No, it's open source released under the GPL v3 up on GitHub.
Do other nonprofits that don't have a facility to fundraising, can they work with?
Anybody can use this. And so the Salesforce Foundation will give 10 free user licenses of the Enterprise Edition, which, to put that in perspective, those are for corporations $160 per user per month. So they'll give any nonprofit $1,600 worth of hosted infrastructure that's incredibly secure and robust for free, which I think is awesome. Obviously, you would, I don't think the system is definitely not at the point now where a nonprofit could just pick it up and set up their own instance and run it kind of internally themselves unless they have a Plone person inside. I think it would be something that a nonprofit would have to engage a consultant to kind of work with them and help them support it. I think you'd want to have that anyhow. But also kind of going back to the cost comparisons, as you start to increase your fundraising, in comparison to the other systems that are out there on the market that charge a percentage of the transaction fee on top of the credit card fees, that opens up a pretty big gap to fund that support. We're looking at, if we were to increase our fundraising at our organization tenfold, we're talking a $500,000 difference a year. That's a lot of money to go to a consultant to kind of help you support and upgrade the system and do all sorts of fun stuff with it. So. Is that it? Cool. Thank you.